Daniel Brooks stood up so fast, his chair scraped back and toppled to the cafe floor, and every head in the room turned toward the man in the crisp shirt whose hands were shaking. He couldn't breathe. Across the table, the woman he'd agreed to meet stared up at him in confusion, but Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the doorway where Mia Carter stood, frozen, her keys still in her hand, her face going pale as she understood exactly what she was seeing. 7 years of silence. 7 years of pretending. And now the truth was walking straight toward his table. Here's the part nobody saw coming. The woman he thought he could never deserve had been in love with him the entire time. Before we go on, I want to know where in the country you're watching from tonight. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. And if you believe some people wait their whole lives for one honest moment, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one finishes. The alarm went off at 04:30 the way it always did, and Daniel Brooks was awake before the second beep. He'd never once slept through it. 12 years in the Navy taught a man to wake in the dark without complaint, and long before the Navy a different kind of childhood had taught him the same lesson. You learned to be quiet. You learned to move before anyone told you to. You learned that the world did not wait for the tired, and it certainly did not wait for the weak. He swung his legs off the mattress and sat there a moment, elbows on his knees, listening to the silence of the small apartment. Down the hall in the second bedroom that was barely bigger than a closet, his son was still asleep. Noah. 6 years old, all knees and questions, the only good thing Daniel was certain he'd ever made. All right, Daniel whispered to himself. Move. He did 50 push-ups on the cold floor before he let himself think a single thought, because thinking first thing in the morning was dangerous. Thinking was where the ghosts lived. So he counted instead. 1, 2, 3. By the time he hit 50, his shoulders were burning and his mind was mercifully blank, and that was the closest thing to peace he knew how to give himself. In the kitchen, he started the coffee and cracked 2 eggs into a pan and moved the way he always moved, efficient, silent, a machine built for maintenance. He laid out Noah's clothes. He packed the little lunchbox with the dinosaur on it. He signed the field trip permission slip that had been sitting on the counter for 3 days, and he only had to read it twice to remember he'd already forgotten about it once. At 5:10, he opened Noah's door. Bud, time to get up. A groan came from under the blanket. I know, Daniel said, sitting on the edge of the bed and putting his hand on the small, warm back. I know. 5 more minutes doesn't exist in this house, remember? We talked about it. You're mean, Noah mumbled. I'm the meanest, Daniel agreed. Now up. Eggs are getting cold. The boy sat up with his hair standing straight off his head, rubbing his eyes with 2 fists. And for 1 second, just one, Daniel felt something in his chest crack open the way it did every single morning. Because Noah had his mother's eyes, and his mother was gone. And there were still days when the sight of those eyes hit Daniel like a fist he never saw coming. He never let it show. That was the rule. Whatever was breaking inside him, the boy would never see it on his face. Come on, Daniel said, standing. Eat up, we've got a big day. Do we? Every day's a big day, kid. That's the deal. They ate together at the little table by the window, and Noah talked with his mouth full about a dinosaur that could apparently swim, fly, and breathe fire, which Daniel pointed out was 3 dinosaurs. No, it's 1, Noah insisted. It's my dinosaur. I made him. Then he sounds like a lot to handle. He is. That's why he's the best. Daniel almost smiled. He drank his coffee and watched his son wave a fork around, and for a moment the apartment didn't feel so much like a place he was surviving in as a place where something was actually alive. Then through the thin wall, he heard the door of the next apartment open and close. He knew that sound the way you know your own heartbeat. He'd know it in his sleep. It was 05:25, which meant it was Mia Carter leaving for her early shift at the elementary school, where she taught, and Daniel's whole body went still, the coffee cup halfway to his mouth, listening. Her footsteps in the hall. The soft jingle of her keys. The little humming sound she made sometimes, some song he never quite caught. He'd never told a living soul about this ridiculous, pathetic habit of a grown man freezing in his own kitchen to listen to the woman next door leave for work. Dad. Daniel blinked. What? You froze again. I didn't freeze. You did, Noah said, entirely too observant for 6. You do it when the door opens next door. You get all? The boy made a stiff face and held his arms out like a robot like that. I don't look like that. You look exactly like that. Daniel set his cup down. Finish your eggs. But the boy wasn't wrong, and that was the trouble with children. They saw everything. They saw the things you'd spent your whole life learning how to hide. Mia Carter had moved into the apartment next door 3.5 years ago, and Daniel remembered the day the way some men remember the day a war started. He'd been carrying a bag of groceries up the outdoor stairs when a moving box slid out of the arms of a woman coming down, and he'd caught it before it hit the ground. Pure reflex, the kind of catch a man makes without thinking. And when he'd looked up to hand it back, she was looking at him with the warmest brown eyes he had ever seen in his life, and she'd said, "Oh, thank you, you have fast hands," and laughed, and something in Daniel Brooks had simply stopped working. Yeah, he'd managed. No problem. That was it. That was the whole conversation, 3.5 years ago. Since then, he'd said maybe 200 words to her total, and he'd counted them like a miser counting coins. Morning, cold out. You need a hand with that no trouble. You have a good one. He had rehearsed and abandoned 1,000 conversations. He had stood at his own door with his hand on the knob, having heard her come home, and told himself today, just say hello, just be a person, and then not open the door at all. Because here was the thing. Daniel knew about himself, the thing he knew the way he knew his own name. A woman like Mia Carter did not end up with a man like him. She was light. She was the kind of person who left cookies on the neighbors' doorsteps at Christmas, and remembered the name of the old man's dog on the ground floor, and waved at the mail carrier like he was an old friend. She glowed. And Daniel was the son of a man who'd taught him that love was a thing that got used up, that got weaponized, that got taken away. Daniel was a man who'd already had one marriage end in silence and grief. Daniel was a man who woke at 04:30 doing push-ups against his own ghosts. You didn't hand a woman like that to a man like that. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair to her. So he listened through the wall, and he caught grocery boxes, and he said his 200 words, and he told himself that was enough, that it had to be enough. It was not enough. It had never once been enough. But a man could lie to himself for a very long time. He dropped Noah at the base daycare at 05:45 and reported to his unit by 0600. And there at least Daniel Brooks knew exactly who he was. Petty Officer First Class Brooks was steady. Petty Officer First Class Brooks was the man they gave the hard jobs to, the one who stayed calm when a job went sideways, the one the younger sailors looked at when they wanted to know if they should be scared. He'd earned that. Nobody handed it to him. He'd built the disciplined, unshakable man in the uniform out of the rubble of a boy who'd had nothing, and he'd built him well. Brooks. His chief caught him in the passageway around 0900. You look like death. I look great, Chief. You look like death that got up early to hit the gym. When'd you last take a day? I take days. Name one. Daniel opened his mouth and found he couldn't. That's what I figured. The chief clapped him on the shoulder. You're a good sailor, Brooks. Best I've got. But you're running on fumes, and a man running on fumes makes mistakes, and I don't want your mistake happening on my watch. You got people who can help you with the boy. I've got it handled, Chief. That's not what I asked. I've got it handled, Daniel said again, and his voice was flat enough that the chief let it go, the way people always eventually let it go, because Daniel had spent a lifetime building walls precisely so that people would let it go. He was very good at being alone. It was possibly the thing he was best at. Marcus Chen found him at lunch, dropping into the seat across from him with a tray and the expression of a man about to start something. No, Daniel said. You don't even know what I'm going to say. I know that face. That's your bad idea face. The answer's no. Marcus had been Daniel's closest friend for 6 years, which made him Daniel's only friend, a fact Marcus liked to point out roughly once a week. He was married with 2 daughters and a wife named Priya, who cooked too much food and kept trying to feed Daniel, and Marcus had made it a personal mission to drag Daniel Brooks back into the land of the living, whether Daniel wanted to come or not. Priya has a friend, Marcus began. No. Her name's Laura. Marcus. She's a social worker. She's kind. She's smart. She's patient, which God knows you'd need. I said no. She works with kids, Daniel. She'd get it. She'd get Noah. You know how rare it is to find somebody who... I'm not doing a blind date, Daniel said. I'm 32. I've got a 6-year-old. I work 14-hour days. I am not exactly a catch, Marcus, and I'm not going to sit across a table from some poor woman and waste her evening. Marcus put his fork down and looked at him, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost the joking edge. When's the last time you let yourself want something? Daniel didn't answer. I'm serious, man. When? Because I've watched you for 6 years and I've never once seen you reach for a single thing that was just for you. Not one. You take care of Noah. You take care of the guys in the unit. You take care of a stranger on the street before you take care of yourself. But you don't want anything. And that's not strength, brother. I used to think it was. It's not. It's a man who decided a long time ago he wasn't allowed to. Daniel stared at his tray. He thought about a door opening at 5:25, a song he never quite caught, a grown man frozen in his own kitchen. There's a woman, he said before he could stop himself. Marcus went very still, the way you go still when a wild animal wanders close and you don't want to spook it. What? Forget it. No, you don't get to say there's a woman and then say forget it. Who, Daniel? It's nothing, it's nobody. She's my neighbor. It doesn't matter. Your neighbor. The teacher. The pretty one with the don't. How long? Daniel was quiet. Daniel, how long? 3.5 years. Daniel said so low that Marcus had to lean in to hear it. For a long moment, his friend didn't say anything at all. And then very carefully, like a man diffusing something, Marcus said, You've been in love with the woman next door for 3.5 years, and you've done nothing. It's not love. Don't call it that. What would you call it? I'd call it... Daniel's jaw worked. I'd call it knowing my place. Marcus sat back, and whatever he saw in Daniel's face made his own face go soft with something that looked terribly like grief. Buddy, he said quietly, your place isn't at the bottom of a well. Somebody told you that a long time ago, and they were wrong, and you were too young to know they were wrong, and you've been living down there ever since. He leaned forward again. Come on the date. Not because Laura's the one. Maybe she is. Maybe she isn't. But because I need to know you can still sit across a table from a woman and let yourself be a person. One dinner, one cafe. You owe me that much after 6 years of my wife's cooking. Daniel looked at his oldest friend for a long time. He thought, if I sit across a table from another woman, maybe I'll stop hearing that door open at 5:25. Maybe I'll finally let go of a thing I was never allowed to hold in the first place. One cafe, Daniel said. One. And if it's a disaster, you never do this again. Marcus grinned like a man who'd just won a war. It's a date. It's a favor, Daniel corrected. It's a date, Brooks. That evening he picked up Noah, and the boy talked the whole way home about the dinosaur and a kid named Tyler who could burp the alphabet, and a bug he'd found on the playground, and named Gerald, and Daniel listened to every word, because listening to his son was the one thing in his life that never once felt like a burden. They came up the outdoor stairs together, Noah taking them one at a time with a stubborn little jump at the top. And there at the door to the next apartment was Mia. She was struggling with a paper grocery bag that was giving out at the bottom, and Daniel's body moved before his brain had a vote. Here! He got a hand under it just as the bottom went oranges spilling into his palm and against his chest. I've got it! I've got it! Oh my gosh! She laughed, breathless, catching a can before it rolled off the landing. Fast hands, again. Yeah, Daniel said. His mouth had gone dry. Yeah. And there they were. The two of them, kneeling on the concrete landing, gathering oranges close enough that he could smell the faint, clean scent of her and Daniel Brooks, who did not lose his composure when a job went sideways, who younger men looked to when they wanted to know whether to be afraid, could not for the life of him think of a single word to say. Hi, Miss Mia, Noah announced. Hi, Noah. Her whole face lit up. How was your day, buddy? I found a bug named Gerald, Gerald. That's a very good name for a bug. Is he a nice bug? He's the nicest bug, Noah said solemnly. But I let him go, 'cause Dad says bugs have families too. Something crossed Mia's face. Then, something soft, something quick, and her eyes flicked up to Daniel's for just a second, and Daniel felt it go through him like a current. Your dad's right, she said gently, still looking at Daniel. Bugs have families too. That's a very kind thing to teach a person. He teaches me lots of stuff, Noah said. He's the meanest, but he's also the nicest. Bud, Daniel managed. It's true. Mia laughed and stood and took the bag from Daniel's arms, and for one moment their hands were both on it, and neither of them moved. Thank you, Daniel, she said. And she said his name like it meant something, like it wasn't just a word. No trouble, Daniel said, the 201st word. It's no trouble. She looked at him a beat longer than she needed to. Then she smiled and unlocked her door and disappeared inside, and Daniel stood on the landing, holding one orange he'd forgotten to give back, feeling like a man who'd been struck by lightning and told to walk it off. Dad? Yeah. You're doing the robot face. Get inside, Noah. Later after dinner, after the bath, after the third dinosaur story, and the 2 glasses of water, and the final negotiation over the closet light, Daniel sat alone in the dark of the living room with the one orange still on the table in front of him, and he did the thing he never let himself do. He let himself think. He thought about the way she'd said his name. He thought about that's a very kind thing to teach a person, and the way her eyes had come up to his when she said it. He thought about 3.5 years of a door opening at 05:25, and a song he never caught, and he thought about Marcus saying, "Your place isn't at the bottom of a well." And then he did what he always did. He shut it down, because he could still hear his father's voice even now, even 20 years gone. You think somebody's gonna want you? Look at you. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. Nobody stays for a boy like you. He could hear it as clearly as if the man were sitting in the room, and the terrible thing, the thing Daniel had never told a single soul, was that some broken 6-year-old part of him still believed every word. He picked up his phone and texted Marcus. Still on for that thing, 3 dots. Then the date. Yeah, Saturday, cafe on 5th. 7 p.m. You're actually gonna show I'm gonna show. Who are you? And what did you do with Daniel? Don't make it weird. It's already weird. I'm proud of you, brother. Daniel set the phone down and looked at the orange for a long time. This is the right thing, he told himself. You go. You meet a nice woman. You let yourself be a person for one evening, and you stop haunting your own kitchen every morning at 5:25. You let Mia go. You never had her anyway. You never even had the right to want her. He believed it the way he believed all the things his father had taught him. He had no idea. Not the faintest idea that 3 feet away, on the other side of a thin apartment wall, a woman was sitting alone in her own dark living room, holding a single orange she'd kept back from the bag, thinking about a man with fast hands and a kind heart who never ever looked at her long enough to see that she'd been looking back the whole time. Saturday came the way dread always comes slowly, and then all at once. Marcus and Priya took Noah for the evening, which meant Daniel had to stand in his own bathroom alone and confront the fact that he owned exactly one shirt that wasn't a uniform or a t-shirt. You look fine, he told the mirror. It's just a cafe. It's a favor. You'll be home by 9. He didn't look fine. He looked like a man being marched somewhere against his will, which was more or less accurate. His hands wouldn't stay still. He'd tied and retied his shoes twice for no reason. 12 years in the Navy, a man who'd stood watch in weather that would put most people flat on their backs. And he was undone by the prospect of one dinner with a kind stranger. It's not the dinner, a quiet voice inside him said. You know it's not the dinner. He ignored it. At 6:45, he left the apartment. And of course, the timing was cruel. Because as he pulled his own door shut, the door next to his opened, and Mia stepped out. She stopped when she saw him. He was in the good shirt. He was clearly, obviously going somewhere that mattered. And Daniel watched something move across her face that he didn't have a name for, something that flickered and was gone. "Oh," she said. "Hey, you're all dressed up." "Yeah, I've got a thing." He heard how it sounded. He winced. "A dinner. Kind of. A dinner." Her smile was still there, but it had changed, somehow gone careful at the edges. "That's nice. That's good for you, Daniel." It's a friend thing. My buddy set it up. It's not really." "Why are you explaining yourself to her?" His brain screamed. "Shut up. Shut up. You don't have to explain," she said quickly. "I hope you have a really nice time. I mean it." And she did mean it. That was the awful part. He could hear that she meant it. And yet, there was something underneath the words, something down at the bottom, that Daniel was far too broken and far too afraid to reach for. "Thanks," he said. "You too. I mean, have a good night." She nodded. She held her keys. She did not go back inside, and she did not walk away. And for a moment, the two of them just stood there on the landing, where 3.5 years ago, he had caught a falling box close enough to touch an entire universe of unspoken things hanging in the air between them. "Well," Mia said finally softly, "don't want to make you late." "Right." Daniel's chest hurt. He didn't know why. "Right, I'll see you." "See you, Daniel." He went down the stairs. And at the bottom, before he could stop himself, he turned and looked back up, and she was still standing there at the top watching him go. Her keys in her hand, her face doing something he'd never seen it do before. She lifted one hand. Not quite a wave. Just lifted it. He lifted his back, and then he made himself turn around and walk to his truck, and he told himself the tightness in his throat was nothing, that it didn't mean anything, that a man like him didn't get to feel this way about a woman like her. That this was exactly why he was going to sit across a table from a kind stranger tonight. To finally let go of a thing he'd never had the right to want. He did not know he was walking directly into the single most important night of his entire life. The cafe on 5th was warm and half full, and Laura Bennett was already there when Daniel arrived, and Daniel could tell within 30 seconds that Marcus had as usual been right about the woman herself. She was kind. She had a steady, patient way about her, the way of someone who spent her days sitting with people on the worst days of their lives, and she stood to shake his hand with a real smile. "Daniel, hi. I'm Laura. You look terrified, please don't be. I promise I'm harmless." "That obvious. You've got the exact face my clients make in the waiting room." She laughed and sat and gestured for him to do the same. "Marcus warned me you'd rather be doing literally anything else. He also said if I got you to stay through dessert, I'd be performing a miracle. So, no pressure." Despite himself, Daniel almost smiled. He's a menace. He is deeply a menace. Priya's a saint for it. She tilted her head. "You've got a little boy. Noah, right 6. Yeah. Tell me about him." And here was the thing about Daniel Brooks. He could not resist an invitation to talk about his son. His shoulders came down half an inch. Something in his face eased. "He named a bug Gerald the other day," Daniel said. "Then let him go because I told him bugs have families." Laura put a hand over her heart. "Okay, that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. You're doing a good job, you know that. Whatever you tell yourself at 2 in the morning, a kid who lets a bug go because it has a family that's a kid being raised right." And Daniel, who had spent 32 years certain he was doing everything wrong, certain he was one mistake away from becoming the man who raised him, felt those words land somewhere very deep and very sore, and had to look down at the table. "Thank you," he said. I don't hear that a lot." "You should hear it more." They talked. It was easier than he'd feared. Laura was good company, and she asked good questions, and she did not flinch when he gave short answers, and slowly Daniel felt the muscles in his back begin very slightly to unclench. This wasn't so bad. He could do this. He could be a person for one evening. Marcus had been right. He could sit across a table from a kind woman, and the bell above the cafe door rang, and Daniel looked up out of pure reflex, the way a soldier always looks up when a door opens. The way you look up when you've spent your whole life waiting for the next bad thing to walk in. And there in the doorway, in a soft blue coat with her keys still in her hand, stood Mia Carter. Everything in the cafe went silent. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was only silent in Daniel's head, only silent in the sudden roaring vacuum where his heart had been, because Mia was standing in the doorway looking at him, and then looking at Laura, and then looking at the two of them together at a small warm table with the candle and the two glasses, and the unmistakable, undeniable shape of what this was. He watched it happen on her face in real time. He watched the warmth drain out of it. He watched her understand. She'd come in, he'd find out later, for nothing. For a tea for a quiet Saturday evening, alone with a book, because she was a woman who left cookies on doorsteps and remembered the dog's name, and glowed, and who went home every night to an empty apartment and listened through a thin wall to a man she'd been quietly, hopelessly in love with for 3.5 years. Daniel's mouth opened. No sound came out. "Daniel," Laura said. "You okay?" "You just went white as a—" "Mia," Daniel said. It came out cracked. It came out like a confession. "I know her. That's my—" But he never finished the sentence because he didn't have a word for what Mia was. Neighbor was a lie, and everyone at that table would have known it was a lie. And across the cafe, Mia Carter stood frozen with her keys in her hand and her eyes shining, and for one endless, unbearable moment, nobody moved at all. And then she did. She didn't turn and run the way Daniel, braced for pain, always braced for pain, expected her to. She didn't flee. She set her jaw. She lifted her chin. And Mia Carter began to walk straight across the cafe, past the tables, past the staring strangers, straight toward Daniel Brooks, with the look of a woman who had spent 3.5 years being quiet, and had at last, in the worst possible moment, decided she was done being quiet forever. Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped back and toppled to the floor. "Mia!" She stopped in front of the table. Up close, he could see she was trembling, could see the tears standing in her eyes, refusing to fall, held back by pure will. Laura looked between them, and something in the social worker's kind, perceptive face shifted, as she understood faster than Daniel ever could exactly what she was looking at. "Mia, Daniel's voice failed him. His hands were shaking. Everything he'd built, every wall, every careful lie he'd told himself for 3.5 years was cracking apart right there in the middle of a cafe on 5th Street. This isn't—" Mia looked at him. Just looked at him, this man she'd caught boxes for, this man whose son she adored, this man whose door she'd stood outside of 100 times with her hand half raised. This man who'd said 200 careful words to her in 3.5 years, and never once, not one single time, looked at her long enough to see what was written all over her face. And when she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the whole cafe like a blade, and it was the sound of a heartbreaking. And it was the bravest thing Daniel Brooks had ever heard in his life. "Why not me?" Mia said. Daniel couldn't breathe. 3.5 years, she whispered, and now the tears came spilling over, and she didn't wipe them away. 3.5 years, Daniel. I have watched you carry that little boy up those stairs when he fell asleep in the truck. I have heard you tell him bugs have families. I have watched you catch every single thing that ever fell in front of you before it hit the ground, every box, every bag, every orange, and I have wondered every single day if you would ever catch the one thing that was standing right in front of you." Her voice broke. "I kept the orange," she said. "The one from Thursday. It's on my counter right now. Isn't that the most pathetic thing you've ever heard, a grown woman keeping an orange?" She laughed, and it was a wet, wrecked sound. "I wasn't distant, Daniel. I was never distant. I was waiting. I have been standing on the other side of that wall for 3.5 years, waiting for you to knock. And tonight, I walk in here, and you're—" She couldn't finish, and Daniel Brooks stood in the wreckage of everything he'd ever told himself, staring at the woman he was certain he could never deserve, and understood all at once, with a force that nearly took his knees out from under him, the single most devastating truth of his entire life. She hadn't been out of reach. She'd been waiting. The whole time on the other side of a thin apartment wall at 0525 every single morning, she'd been waiting for him to be brave. And he never had been. The cafe had gone so quiet that Daniel could hear the espresso machine hissing behind the counter, and he stood there with his overturned chair at his feet, and no idea in the world what to do with his hands. "Mia," he said. It was the only word he had. He'd said her name 1,000 times in his own head over 3.5 years, and now that he needed to say it out loud in front of strangers, in front of the woman he'd come here to meet, It was all he could get out. "Mia, please." "Please, what?" She wasn't shouting. That was somehow worse. Her voice had dropped low and it shook, and every word came out like it cost her something. "Please don't make a scene. Please don't embarrass you. I'm not the one who's embarrassed Daniel. I'm past embarrassed. I got here about 3.5 years ago." Laura, still seated, set her napkin gently on the table. She didn't say anything. Daniel would remember later that she had the good grace in that moment to become almost invisible, to fold her hands and lower her eyes and give these two strangers the smallest amount of privacy she could carve out of a public room. "I didn't know," Daniel said. "Mia, I swear to God I didn't know. That's the part I can't." She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth for a second hard, like she was physically holding something in. How did you not know I baked you cookies? I baked you cookies, Daniel, at Christmas, and you said thanks, you didn't have to, and you handed the plate back the next day washed, and I stood in my kitchen, and I cried. Over a plate. Somebody at a table near the window shifted uncomfortable, and Daniel became distantly aware that people were watching, that this was the kind of thing that happened to other people in other people's lives, not to Petty Officer First Class Brooks, who did not lose his composure when a job went sideways. "I remember the cookies," he said quietly. "Do you?" "They were—" His voice caught. "They had the sprinkles shaped like snowflakes. I remember. Noah ate 4 of them before dinner, and I let him because you made them. I couldn't tell him no. They came from you." Mia stared at him. The tears were still coming, but something had changed in her face. Some crack of confusion, some flicker of weight. "You remember the sprinkles," she said. "I remember everything." The words came out of him before he could stop them, and once they started, he couldn't get them to stop. "I remember the song you hum in the mornings. I don't know the words. I've never heard the words, I only hear it through the wall, but I know the tune. I remember you leave at 05:25. Every day. 5:25. I know because I—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "I know because I stand in my kitchen and I wait to hear the door. Every morning. For 3.5 years. My own son caught me doing it. A 6-year-old figured it out before I did." Now it was Mia who couldn't speak. "So don't—" Daniel's voice cracked wide open right there in front of the espresso machine and the window table and the woman he'd come to meet. "Don't stand there and think I didn't see you. I saw you. Mia, I saw you so clearly it hurt to look. That was the entire problem. I saw you every single day and I—" "And you what?" she whispered. "And I decided I wasn't allowed to." The words hung there. Laura stood then very quietly. She picked up her coat from the back of her chair and she looked at Daniel, and there was nothing hurt in her face, only something soft and a little sad, and mostly strangely kind. "Daniel," she said gently. He turned stricken. "Laura, I never should have. This isn't fair to you. I never should have come. I'm so sorry. Stop." She smiled. It was a real smile. The smile of a woman who spent her whole life reading rooms and had read this one in about 4 seconds flat. "You have nothing to apologize for. I've been doing this job 11 years. I know what it looks like when 2 people have been circling each other for a long time." She glanced at Mia, then back at him. "You didn't come here to meet me. You came here to try to talk yourself out of her. And it didn't work, did it?" Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Yeah," Laura said softly. "That's what I thought." She shrugged her coat on, unhurried, and picked up her purse, and paused as she stepped around the table. "For what it's worth, Marcus told me a lot about you. He said you were the best man he knew, and you were the only one who didn't believe it." She looked at him level and warm. "He's right. Believe it, Daniel. It's real late in the evening for you to still be arguing the point." And then to Mia, quietly, woman to woman. "He's been talking about a bug named Gerald and how his kid let it go. You should hear him do it. It's—" She smiled. "It's a whole thing. Take care of each other." She squeezed Mia's arm once gently on the way past. And then Laura Bennett walked out of the cafe and out of their lives, and the little bell rang over the door, and she was gone, and Daniel Brooks was alone in the middle of a warm, crowded room with the only woman he had ever wanted and absolutely nowhere left to hide. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Sit down," Mia said finally. Her voice was wrecked but steady. "People are staring. Sit down, Daniel. Pick up your chair." He picked up his chair. He sat. His hands were still shaking, and he pressed them flat against his thighs to make them stop an old trick. A trick he'd learned as a boy, for exactly this, for the moments when the shaking might give him away. Mia sat down across from him in the seat that was still warm from Laura, and for a long moment she just looked at him. The candle threw light up under her face. Her eyes were red. She'd stopped crying, but it was the fragile kind of stop, the kind that could go either way. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I don't know why I did that. I don't do things like that. I don't walk across restaurants, and I've never done anything like that in my whole life." She laughed shaky and wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I think I just lost about 10 years of self-control all at once. Mia, I need to say it, all of it, because I've been carrying it around for so long and I don't think I can carry it one more day. So if I don't say it now, I never will. And I'll go back to my apartment and you'll go back to yours, and we'll say morning and cold out through the wall for the rest of our lives. And I can't do that anymore." She took a breath. "So just let me talk. Please." "Okay," Daniel said. "Okay. I'm listening." And so she talked. "The first time I saw you," Mia said, "you caught a box. You probably don't even remember. You had a moving box slip 3.5 years ago, September. It was hot." Daniel's voice was very quiet. "You had a green shirt on. You said I had fast hands, and you laughed, and I forgot how to talk." Mia stared at him. "You remember what shirt I was wearing," she said. "I told you. I remember everything. That's—" She pressed her lips together. Her eyes filled again. "Daniel, do you have any idea what it does to a person to find out right now in a cafe with a candle that the man she's been in love with for 3.5 years has remembered the color of her shirt this whole time? Do you know what that does? Because I spent all that time thinking you didn't see me at all. I thought I was a nice neighbor. I thought I was the lady next door who made too many cookies and talked too much, and you were just being polite. I had myself half convinced I made the whole thing up. You didn't make it up. I know that now. But do you understand? You let me believe it. Every day. You had 100 chances, and every single time you looked right through me. And I told myself, okay, that's my answer. That's him telling me no, in the kindest way he knows how, by just not seeing me. And I let it break my heart quietly in my own kitchen, so it wouldn't be your problem. Because that's what you do, isn't it? When you love someone who doesn't love you back. You keep it small. You keep it where they can't trip over it. Daniel felt each word go into him like it was aimed. I loved you back, he said. God, Mia, I loved you back the whole time. That's not... He shook his head hard. You've got it exactly backwards. I wasn't looking through you, I was looking away. On purpose, every time. Because if I looked at you for 1 second longer than I was allowed to, I was afraid you'd see the whole thing, and then what? And then you'd have to be nice about it, Daniel said. You'd have to let me down easy. And I couldn't. I would rather have said morning through that wall for the rest of my life than watch your face while you tried to figure out how to tell me a man like me doesn't get a woman like you. Mia went very still. A man like you, she repeated slowly. A woman like me. You said that outside, too. This morning. A friend thing, it's not really. You've got these categories in your head. What is that? What are those? What is a man like you, Daniel? Because from where I'm sitting, a man like you is a man who gets up before the sun and makes his kid eggs and packs a dinosaur lunchbox and teaches a 6-year-old that bugs have families. From where I'm sitting, a man like you is the best thing on that whole street, and he doesn't even know it. You don't know where I come from. Then tell me. Mia, no. She reached across the table, and for the first time in 3.5 years, Mia Carter took Daniel Brooks's hand in both of hers, and Daniel felt it like a live wire, like something he'd been starving for so long he'd forgotten it was food. No more. You do this. Marcus's friend said it too. She read you in 4 seconds. You argue the point. You've got some voice in your head that's been arguing the point your whole life, and I want to hear it. I want to hear who taught you that you were a man like you. because I would like to have a word with them. Daniel looked down at her hands around his. His were bigger, scarred across the knuckles, a working man's hands, a soldier's hands. Hers were warm. "My father," he said. Mia didn't move. "My father taught me," Daniel said, and his voice had gone flat and far away. The voice of a man reading off a report because it was the only way he could get the words out at all. He drank. And when he drank, he liked to explain things to me. He liked to explain what I was. And what I was, according to him, was nothing. Less than nothing. He had a whole speech. You think somebody's gonna want you? Look at you. Nobody stays for a boy like you. He'd say it slow so it'd stick. And it stuck, Mia. I was 6. I was Noah's age. You believe your father when you're 6. You believe him about everything. And by the time you're old enough to know he was wrong, it's already in the concrete. It's set. You can know a thing is a lie with your whole adult brain and still feel it's true down in the part of you that's still 6 years old. Where's your mother? Left when I was 8. I don't blame her, honestly. It was bad. But she took herself out of it, and she didn't take me, and that was more proof, wasn't it? Even she didn't stay for a boy like me. He said it without self-pity, which was somehow the worst part, so plainly like a fact about the weather. So, I got good at not needing anybody. I got real good at it. It's basically my only actual skill. I can go longer without needing a single person than anybody you'll ever meet. That's not a skill, Mia whispered. That's a scar you decided to call a skill. Daniel laughed one short, broken sound. Yeah, Marcus said something like that today too. Bottom of a well. Marcus is right. Laura's right. I'm right. That's 3 people in one day, Daniel. At some point, you have to consider the possibility that the vote's not going your way. She squeezed his hand. What happened to him? Your father. Dead. 9 years now. Liver finally. I went to the funeral. He looked up. You want to know the sickest part? I stood there at his grave, and part of me was still waiting. 33 years old, standing over a hole in the ground, and part of me was still waiting for him to sit up and tell me he was proud of me. Just once. That's how deep it goes. He's dead, and I'm still trying to earn it. Mia was crying again quietly, but she didn't let go of his hand, not for a second. And then I met a girl, Daniel went on, because he'd started now, and he found he couldn't stop 3.5 years of silence coming apart, all at once. Noah's mom, Sarah. And I thought, okay, maybe I get this after all. Maybe somebody stays. And she got pregnant and we got married. And for about a year, I actually let myself believe it. I let myself all the way in Mia. First time in my whole life. And then... He stopped. And then... He said she died. Noah was 18 months old. Aneurysm. No warning, nothing. No, she was making a grocery list. She was standing at the counter making a grocery list, and she said her head hurt, and by that night she was gone. Just gone. And you know what the voice in my head said? You know what it said, standing in that hospital? His jaw was trembling now, the shaking he could never quite hide finally winning. It said, see told you. Nobody stays. You let one person in 30 years and look what happens. That's what you get. Daniel, so I stopped. He pulled in a ragged breath. I stopped letting anybody in, for good that time. I had Noah, and that was Noah. I couldn't help Noah. I'd walk into fire for. He's not a choice. He's my whole heart, walking around outside my body, and there's nothing I can do about that. But everybody else. I closed the door. I decided the safest thing, the smartest thing, the kindest thing I could do for another human being was to keep them the hell away from me. Because everybody I love either leaves or dies, or was never supposed to want me in the first place, and I was done. I was done, Mia. Was done. The candle flickered between them. And then you dropped a box, he said. Mia let out a sound that was half sob and half laugh. And I caught it, Daniel said. And you looked up at me with those eyes, and you said I had fast hands, and I thought, oh no. I thought, oh no, not this, anything but this. Because I knew in that first second. I knew you were exactly the thing I'd spent my whole life protecting people from. I knew if I let myself want you, one of two things would happen. Either you'd say no, which is what I deserved, which is what the voice promised me, or you'd say yes and then you'd leave, or you'd die, or you'd figure out what I really was, and it'd all come apart, and I'd be standing over another grocery list. And I could not do it again. I could not survive it a second time. So I decided the safest place for you, the kindest place, was on the other side of that wall, where I could keep you, where nothing bad could happen to you because of me. You don't get to decide that, Mia said, and there was something fierce in it now under the tears. You don't get to decide what's safe for me. You don't get to love someone quietly for 3.5 years to protect them, and never once ask them if they wanted protecting. I didn't want to be safe, Daniel. I wanted to be chosen. And you took that away from me, and you didn't even tell me you were doing it. Daniel had no answer for that, because she was right, and it landed on him with the full weight of 3.5 years, and he understood sitting there that his great act of love, his careful, quiet, self-sacrificing decision to keep her at a distance for her own good, had also been the most selfish thing he'd ever done. He'd made her choice for her. He'd loved her the way a coward loves. From behind a wall where it was safe. You're right, he said. God, you're right. I never thought of it like that. I honestly thought I was doing you a favor. Isn't that... He pressed his free hand over his eyes. Isn't that just the most arrogant thing? I decided you were better off without me, and I never even gave you a vote. Give me one now. He lowered his hand. Right now, Mia said. Give me the vote now. Ask me the thing you should have asked me 3.5 years ago. I'll wait. I've gotten pretty good at waiting. Daniel looked at her, and Petty Officer First Class Brooks, who had stood watch through storms, who younger men looked to when they wanted to know whether to be afraid, who had buried a wife and a father and half of himself and gotten up at 4:30 every morning. Anyway, found that he was more terrified than he had ever been in his entire life. More terrified than combat. More terrified than the hospital. Because in combat and in hospitals, the worst thing was death. And death, he understood death, he'd made his peace with. This was worse. This was hope. And hope was the one thing his father had trained out of him so thoroughly that reaching for it now felt like putting his hand into fire. I don't know how, he said, barely a whisper. Yes, you do. Mia, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to want something out loud. Every time I've ever wanted something, it got taken, and I learned to stop wanting, so it'd stop getting taken, and now you're asking me to. You're asking me to stand out in the open and want you. And every single part of me that's still 6 years old is screaming that the second I do, that's the second I lose you. That's how it works. That's the rule. You want it, you lose it. That's not a rule. That's a scared little boy who got taught a lie by a cruel man. Mia leaned in both her hands tight around his one. Daniel, look at me. Look at me. I am not going to leave. I'm not going to die, not on any schedule I can control, and neither are you. And if we spend our whole lives refusing to love each other because someday one of us won't be here, then he wins. Your father. He wins. He reaches out of a grave you already visited, and he takes this from you too. Is that what you want? You want him to have this? No, Daniel said. It came out low and raw. No, I don't want him to have this. Then don't let him. The cafe had mostly stopped watching them. The espresso machine hissed. Somewhere behind the counter, a spoon clinked against a cup. And Daniel Brooks sat in a pool of candlelight, holding the hand of the woman he'd loved silently for 3.5 years. And he made the bravest decision of his life, which was simply to stop being brave in the way his father had taught him, to stop enduring, to stop protecting, to stop keeping it small, and to be brave in the entirely different way that Mia was asking for. Mia Carter, he said, and his voice broke on her name, and he let it break. I have been in love with you since September 3.5 years ago, since you dropped a box in a green shirt and told me I had fast hands. I hear you leave every morning at 5:25, and I stand in my kitchen like a fool and wait for it. I kept a Christmas cookie plate 3 days before I could bring myself to give it back because it was the only thing in my apartment you'd touched. I have written 100 conversations with you in my head and never said a single one out loud. And I decided You deserved somebody who wasn't broken, and I was wrong because that wasn't my decision to make. So I'm making a different one. I'm Mia. I'm asking you to give a broken man a chance he's pretty sure he doesn't deserve. Will you? His throat closed. He forced it open. Will you let me try? For a moment, Mia didn't say anything at all. And Daniel felt the old terror rise up, felt the 6-year-old brace for it. Here it comes. Here's the no. Here's where she lets you down. Easy. You knew it? You always knew it. You kept the cookie plate, Mia said. 3 days. I kept the orange. She was smiling through the tears, now that warm smile, the one that had stopped him working 3.5 years ago. It's on my counter. It's probably going bad. I don't even care. I couldn't throw it away. It was the last thing you handed me. Mia. Yes, she said. Daniel stopped breathing. Yes, you idiot, Mia said, laughing and crying at once. Yes, you can try. Yes, I'll let you. Yes to all of it. Yes, 3.5 years ago, and yes, right now, and yes, God, Daniel, it was always yes. It was always going to be yes. You just had to ask. And Daniel Brooks, who did not lose his composure, who had not truly wept since he was a boy, learning not to, who had built a fortress out of silence, so complete that his own son had to catch him listening at a wall, put his free hand over both of theirs, and bowed his head, and finally, let himself cry right there at a small table in a cafe on 5th Street, not the choked-back grief of the hospital or the graveside, but something else entirely. Something he had no name for, because he had never once in his life felt it. Relief. It was relief. Hey, Mia said softly, coming around the table, now sliding into the chair beside his, her arm going around his shoulders, her forehead coming to rest against his temple. Hey, it's okay. I've got you. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? I'm right here. I'm sorry. Daniel got out. I'm sorry it took me 3.5 years, Mia. I wasted 3.5. Stop! She pulled back enough to look at him, and she took his face in both her hands. This face she'd wanted for so long, and she wiped his tears with her thumbs like it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't waste it. We were both waiting on opposite sides of the same wall. We were scared of the same thing from 2 different rooms. She smiled. But the wall's gone now. Okay, right now in this cafe with these people definitely still watching us, the wall is gone. There's no more wall. Daniel looked at her. There's no more wall, he repeated like a man learning a language. None. Say it again. There's no more wall. Good. She kissed his forehead, gentle, certain. Now, I want you to do something for me. 2 things, actually. Anything. 1, I want you to go home tonight and I want you to sleep. Really sleep. Not the thing you do where you lie there fighting ghosts till the alarm. I want you to sleep like a man who knows somebody's on the other side of that wall who wants him. Can you do that? I'll try. And 2. Her voice went softer. Tomorrow's Sunday. I don't teach, and you don't have your kid till the afternoon. Marcus texted me the whole schedule an hour ago, that traitor. He set this up on both ends, and don't you dare be mad at him. So tomorrow morning at exactly 5:25. She smiled. I'm not going to work. I'm going to knock on your door. And I want you to be standing on the other side of it. No wall. Just a door, and you'll open it, and it'll be the first morning of the rest of it. Deal. Daniel looked at this woman. This warm, kind, absurdly brave woman who had walked across a whole cafe to break down a wall he'd spent 3.5 years building, and for the first time since he was a very small boy. Before his father's voice, before his mother left, before any of it. Daniel Brooks let himself believe, all the way down to the 6-year-old at the bottom of the well, that maybe the voice had been wrong about him this whole time. That maybe somebody did stay. That maybe he was not after all a man like him. Deal, he said. And Mia Carter smiled and took his hand, and outside the cafe window, the streetlights came on over 5th Street, one after another, like something was finally quietly being lit. Daniel did not sleep like a man who knew somebody wanted him. He tried. He'd promised her he'd try, And he was a man who kept his promises, so he lay down in the dark at 11 o'clock, and he closed his eyes, and he did everything right. But sleep wouldn't come, and for once, it wasn't the ghosts keeping him up. It was the opposite. It was the thing he had no defense against, because he'd never built one, because he'd never needed one. It was hope sitting on his chest, like a cat refusing to move. At 2 in the morning, he gave up and went to the kitchen and stood at the window in the dark, and he could see faintly the light coming from under the wall. Mia's living room light still on. She wasn't sleeping either. And Daniel Brooks put his hand flat against the wall between their two apartments. This wall he'd stood on his side of for 3.5 years, and he thought about the fact that she was awake 3 feet away on the other side for the same reason he was. He almost laughed. Two grown adults wide awake at 2 in the morning, kept up by the same thing, separated by half an inch of drywall. "There's no more wall," he said quietly to the dark, testing it out. It still didn't feel true. But it felt closer to true than it had that morning. And Daniel had learned a long time ago that sometimes closer to true was all you got, and you took it, and you built on it. He went back to bed. And somewhere around 3:30, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Daniel Brooks fell asleep without fighting anything at all. The alarm went off at 4:30, the way it always did, and Daniel, who was awake before the second beep, the way he was always awake before the second beep, lay there for one disoriented moment before it all came flooding back. The cafe, the overturned chair, Laura's kind, sad smile. Why not me? The orange on her counter? Yes, you idiot. Yes. To all of it, and something happened in his chest that hadn't happened in years. He wanted to get up, not because he had to, because he wanted to. He did his 50 push-ups, but he didn't count them to keep the ghosts away. He counted them because in 55 minutes there was going to be a knock on his door, and he wanted to be ready. And being ready was the only way Daniel Brooks knew how to hold a thing that mattered. He showered. He made coffee 2 cups this time out of habit, or hope he wasn't sure which. He stood at the mirror in the good shirt again, the only good shirt, and this time, when he looked at himself, he didn't see a man being marched somewhere against his will. He saw a man who was terrified in an entirely new direction, which his oldest friend would probably have called progress. At 05:20, he stopped pretending to do anything and just stood by the door. At 5:23, he told himself he was being ridiculous, standing by a door 2 minutes early like a kid on Christmas. At 5:24, he didn't move. At 5:25 exactly, there was a soft knock. Daniel put his hand on the knob. And for 1 second, one last second, the old voice tried. This is where it goes wrong. This is where you open it and she's changed her mind. She's had all night to think she came to tell you it was a mistake. Nobody stays for a boy like... He opened the door. Mia was standing there in a soft gray sweater, holding 2 mugs. Her hair still a little damp, her eyes a little red from not sleeping, and the most extraordinary smile on her face he had ever seen in his life. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Daniel said. "I made coffee," she said, holding up the mugs. "Then I realized you probably also made coffee because you're you, and now we have 4 coffees and I don't even care." Daniel looked at the 2 mugs in her hands, and the 2 on his counter behind him, and something in his chest cracked wide open. Warm this time, and he started to laugh, really laugh. A sound that surprised them both. A sound Noah would have said he'd never heard his dad make. "I made 2, he admitted. I don't know why. Habit, I guess. Or hope," Mia said softly. "Or hope," Daniel agreed. And they stood there in the doorway in the exact spot where a wall had stood for 3.5 years, holding 4 cups of coffee between them and grinning like idiots, and Daniel Brooks thought that he had never in his life been so glad to have wasted good coffee. "Are you going to let me in?" Mia said. "Or are we doing this in the hallway?" "Come in." He stepped back. "Come in, yeah. God, sorry. Come in." She came in, and it was the strangest, most ordinary miracle Mia Carter standing in his living room, looking around at the small, tidy apartment at Noah's dinosaur drawings, taped to the fridge at the neat stack of the boys' books by the couch, at the one framed photo on the shelf that Daniel had turned face down last night out of some reflex he didn't understand, and then turned back up again at 2 in the morning. Because there was no more wall, and there were going to be no more turned down photos either. Mia crossed to it and picked it up, Sarah holding a baby Noah laughing at something out of frame. Daniel went still. "She's beautiful," Mia said quietly. "Mia, you don't have to." "No." She set it back down gently, exactly where it had been. "I want to." "Daniel, I'm not scared of her. I want you to know that right now, on the first morning before anything else, I'm not going to be jealous of a photograph. She was Noah's mom. She's part of what made you the man I've been in love with for 3.5 years. She stays right there on that shelf, okay? For Noah and for you and for her. I'm not competing with a ghost. I don't want the version of you that never loved anybody. I want the whole one, scars and all." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "You keep doing that," he said. "Doing what?" "Saying the exact thing that the 6-year-old at the bottom of the well needs to hear. It's like you can see him. Nobody's ever been able to see him." "I've been watching you for 3.5 years," Mia said. "I've had a lot of time to learn you." She handed him one of her mugs, took one of his from the counter, and sat down on his couch like she'd been sitting there her whole life. "Now, sit. Drink your coffee. We have exactly—" She checked her phone. "4 hours and 35 minutes before you have to go get Noah, and I want to spend every single one of them finding out everything I've been guessing at through a wall. Starting with the song." "What song?" "The one you said I hum, in the mornings. You said you know the tune but not the words." She grinned. "I want to know if you actually know it, or if you've been imagining a woman humming for 3 years like a crazy person." Daniel sat down beside her, careful still not quite believing he was allowed. And then, feeling like a complete fool, he hummed it soft and slightly off the tune he'd carried in his head for 3.5 years without ever knowing its name. Mia's face changed. "Daniel," she said. "What? Did I get it wrong?" "No." Her eyes had filled again. "No, you got it exactly right. That's my mom used to sing that. When I was little. She died 4 years ago, right before I moved here. That's actually why I moved. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't full of her. And I hum it in the mornings without even thinking about it. It's the sound of being safe. It's the sound of being small and taken care of." She wiped her eyes and laughed. "And you learned it. Through a wall. You learned my dead mother's lullaby through a wall and carried it around in your head for 3 years without even knowing what it was." "I didn't know," Daniel said. "Mia, I swear I didn't." "I know you didn't. That's what makes it—" She shook her head, half laughing, half crying. "You keep doing this. You keep telling me these things you did without meaning anything by them, and every single one of them is the kindest thing anybody's ever. You kept the cookie plate. You know the shirt. You learned the lullaby, and this whole time you thought you were a man like you. Daniel, you've been in love with me so carefully, so gently for 3.5 years, and you did it so quietly that you didn't even know you were doing it. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand that most people spend their whole lives looking for 1/10 of that?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He set down his coffee, and he reached over slowly, giving her every chance to pull back. And when she didn't, he pulled her into him. And Mia Carter came into his arms, like she'd been waiting 3.5 years to do exactly that, which of course she had. They sat like that for a long time. Not talking, just breathing. "I have to tell you something," Daniel said finally into her hair. "And I need you to hear the whole thing before you say anything, because it's the part that scares me most, and if I don't say it now, I'll bury it, and I'm done burying things." Mia went still against his chest. "Okay, Noah," Daniel said. "This isn't just me. Whatever this is, whatever it's not just my heart on the table. It's his. He's 6. He lost his mom when he was a baby. He doesn't even remember her, and for his whole life, it's been me and him, and that's it. That's the whole world. And he's Mia. He adores you. He talks about you." Miss Mia said this. Miss Mia's the one who he lights up. And that terrifies me. Because if this doesn't work, if we try this and it falls apart, it's not just me who gets hurt. It's a little boy who's already lost one person he loved and would be losing another. And I've spent 6 years making sure nothing could hurt him. I can't gamble with him. He didn't sign up for this. He doesn't get a vote, And he's the one with the most to lose. Mia pulled back to look at him, and her face was serious now, all the laughter gone, and Daniel braced himself for he didn't know what. For her to say it was too much. For her to say she hadn't signed up for a kid, for the exit. "You're right," she said instead. Daniel blinked. "You're completely right," Mia said. "It's not just your heart, it's his. And that's exactly the thing I'd want you to be worried about, because it tells me you're the father I already knew you were." She took his hands. "So here's what I need you to understand. I'm not coming into that little boy's life as an experiment. I'm not going to be Miss Mia, who's around for a few months and then disappears and teaches him one more time that people leave. If we do this, if we really do this, then I'm in it for him too, not just for you. I don't get to have you and treat him like a package deal I tolerate. He'd be mine too, in every way that counts. And that's not a small thing, Daniel. I know. It's not, so I'm not going to say it lightly, and I'm not going to rush it. We go slow. We go so slow. For him. We don't tell him anything until we're both sure, and when we do tell him, we tell him together, and we never ever make him a promise we won't keep. Deal." Daniel stared at her. "You've thought about this," he said. Mia, you've already thought about all of this. Daniel." She smiled, and it was gentle and a little sad. "I've been in love with you for 3.5 years. Do you think I never once thought about the little boy who comes up the stairs with you every night? Do you think I watched you carry him when he fell asleep in the truck, and never imagined—" Her voice caught. "I imagined a lot. On the other side of that wall, I imagined a lot of things I never let myself really hope for. Noah was in most of them, and that undid Daniel completely. The idea that she had in her own quiet apartment on her own side of the wall imagined a life that had his son in it, dreamed toward the boy, the same way she'd dreamed toward him, wanted the whole of it, the messy, inconvenient package of a broken man and a motherless child, and wanted it enough to have already worked out how to do it right. How are you real?" Daniel said. "How are you? I spent 3.5 years certain that if I ever let anybody see the whole thing, the kid, the ghosts, the father, all of it, they'd run. And you're sitting on my couch at 6 in the morning, with 4 cups of coffee, telling me you already worked out how to love my son. Because it was never a burden to me," Mia said simply. "That's the thing you couldn't see from your side of the wall. Everything you thought made you unlovable. The kid, the scars. The fact that you're a package deal. That's the exact stuff that made me fall in love with you. I didn't fall for a man in a uniform. I fell for a man carrying a sleeping kid up the stairs, teaching him bugs, have families keeping a cookie plate 3 days because he couldn't stand to give back the one thing a woman had made him. Daniel, your damage isn't the price of you. It's the shape of you, and I want the whole shape." Daniel had to close his eyes. "My father," he said very quietly, "spent 13 years teaching me the exact opposite of that. And you just undid a piece of it in one sentence. Sitting on my couch. In your sweater. Before the sun's even up." "Then I'll say it every day," Mia said. "For as long as it takes. I'll say it every morning at 5:25 until the 6-year-old at the bottom of the well finally believes it. I've got nothing but time, Daniel. I've been saving it up for you." They talked until the sun came up. Daniel told her things he had never told another living soul. He told her about the funeral, about standing at the grave still waiting to be told he was proud. He told her about the year with Sarah, when he'd let himself all the way in, and the grocery list and the hospital, and the voice that said, "See, told you." He told her about the daycare, and the 14-hour days, and the chief telling him he was running on fumes, and how he'd said, "I've got it handled," because he'd never once in his life had anybody to say anything else to. And Mia told him things too. About her mother and the lullaby, and moving to a town full of strangers to escape a town full of grief. About the loneliness of a woman who baked too many cookies precisely because she had nobody to bake them for. About the 100 times she'd stood at her own door, with her hand raised to knock on his, and lost her nerve, and gone back inside. About the orange on her counter that she still hadn't been able to throw away. "We were doing the exact same thing," Daniel said, wondering. "The whole time. Standing at our own doors with our hands up, losing our nerve, going back inside, on opposite sides of the same wall. Scared of the same thing from two different rooms, Mia said. I told you that last night. I know. It's just... He shook his head. 3.5 years, Mia. If you'd knocked, or if I'd knocked one time, any of those 100 times. But we didn't. She took his hand. And I've decided I'm not going to spend our whole life grieving the 3.5 years we lost, because that's just a different way of letting your father win. He'd love that, wouldn't he? Us finally together, and still sad. No, we got here. That's the part that matters. We got here, and we're not scared anymore, and there's no more wall. She smiled. Say it again. I like watching you say it. There's no more wall. Better every time. Around 10. Daniel's phone buzzed. Marcus. So, did you go? Priya says, if you stood Laura up, she's never speaking to you again. How was it? Daniel looked at the phone, then at Mia, then back at the phone, and a slow grin spread across his face, a real one, the kind that reached his eyes, the kind almost nobody had ever seen on Daniel Brooks. It's Marcus, he said. He wants to know how the date went. Oh, this is going to be good, Mia said, leaning in to see the screen. What are you going to tell him? Daniel thought about it. Then he typed slowly with his one free hand because his other one was holding hers, and he wasn't about to let go. The date was a disaster. Laura left after 10 minutes. He hit send. Watched the 3 dots appear, immediately frantic. What? Daniel, what did you do? I set that up so carefully, Daniel let him sweat for exactly 10 seconds. Then, she left because my neighbor walked in, called me out in front of the whole cafe, and asked me why I never chose her. Turns out she's been in love with me for 3.5 years. We've been up all night. There are currently 4 cups of coffee on my couch. Your date was a disaster, and it was the best night of my entire life. Thank you for being a menace. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, for a long time. Then, Marcus's reply came through, and it was just one line. And when Daniel read it, he had to set the phone down and press the heel of his hand against his eyes for a second, because his oldest friend, the menace, the man who'd spent 6 years dragging him back into the land of the living, had written, I've been waiting 6 years to get a text like that from you, brother. Go get your happy ending. You've more than earned it. And tell Mia I said she's got better aim than me. I was going for the wrong target the whole time. What did he say? Mia asked. Daniel showed her the phone, and Mia Carter read it and laughed, and then her eyes filled, and she leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder and said, I like him. I like him a lot. He's the only real friend I've got, Daniel said. For 6 years, he's been the only person on earth who thought I was worth anything. Him, and now you. And Noah? And Noah. Daniel's voice softened. Always Noah. At noon, Mia stood to go, because Daniel had to leave soon to pick up his son. And they'd agreed carefully, deliberately, the two of them making their first real decision together, that today was not the day to tell Noah anything. Today was for them. Noah came later, when they were sure when they could do it right together. But at the door where a wall had been, Mia stopped. Daniel, she said. Before I go, I need to know one thing. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it's scary because we're not doing walls anymore. Anything. Are you all in? She looked up at him, steady, brave, the woman who'd walked across a whole cafe. Because I am. I'm all the way in. I've been all the way in for 3.5 years, but you've spent your whole life keeping one foot near the exit, keeping people at a distance, keeping it small so nobody can trip over it. And I need to know that this time with me with Noah, you're not going to do that. I don't need you fixed. I don't need you to never be scared again, but I need to know you're not going to run when it gets real. Because it's going to get real, Daniel. Somewhere down the road it's going to get hard, and I need to know that when it does, you're going to knock on my door instead of standing behind it. Are you all in? Daniel Brooks looked at her, and he thought about his father, and the well, and the grocery list, and 13 years of being taught that wanting a thing was the same as losing it. He thought about 6 years of, I've got it handled. He thought about 100 nights standing at his own door with his hand raised. He thought about how easy it would be, how familiar, How safe to say I'll try to hedge to keep one foot near the exit the way he always had. And then he thought about 4 cups of coffee, and a lullaby learned through a wall, and a woman who'd already worked out how to love his son. "No," Daniel said. Mia's face flickered. "No, I'm not going to say I'm all in," Daniel said, and he took both her hands, and his voice was steadier than it had ever been in his life. "Because that's an easy thing to say, and I've spent my whole life not doing the easy thing halfway. So I'm not going to promise you I'll never be scared, because I will be probably tomorrow, probably 100 more times. And I'm not going to promise you I'll be good at this, because I've never done it, and I'm going to get it wrong. But here's what I'll promise you. Mia Carter, and I'll promise it as a man who has never once broken a promise in his life." He took a breath. "When it gets hard and you're right, I will knock on your door. Every single time. Even when I'm scared. Especially when I'm scared. I will not stand behind it. I did that for 3.5 years and I'm never doing it again. That's not all in. All in is just words. This is a promise. And I keep my promises. Ask anybody." Mia's eyes were streaming now, but she was smiling that warm smile, the one that had stopped him working 3.5 years ago on a hot day in September. "That's better than all in," she whispered. "I know," Daniel said. "I meant it to be." And she kissed him finally, 3.5 years late in the doorway, where a wall used to be, and Daniel Brooks kissed her back, and somewhere at the bottom of a very deep well, a 6-year-old boy who'd been told nobody would ever stay heard for the first time in his whole life, the sound of someone deciding to stay. They went slow, the way they'd promised each other. For 3 weeks, it was mornings and evenings stolen around the edges of Daniel's life. Coffee at 05:25. Before the sun came up, a text at lunch. Mia's light and Daniel's light, both on late into the night on opposite sides of a wall that no longer meant what it used to mean. They didn't tell Noah. That was the rule they'd made, the careful, serious rule, and they kept it even when it was hard. Even when Mia had to pretend she wasn't already halfway in love with a 6-year-old she'd been watching climb those stairs for 3.5 years. But children are not fools, and Noah Brooks least of all. "Dad?" It was a Tuesday night, 3 weeks in, and Daniel was doing the dishes while Noah sat at the table pretending to color and actually watching his father with the narrow-eyed focus of a small detective. "Yeah, bud." "You're happy." Daniel's hands went still in the soapy water. "I'm what?" "You're happy," Noah repeated like it was an accusation. "You do the humming thing now. When you make breakfast. You never used to hum, and you're not doing the robot face anymore when Miss Mia's door opens. You used to freeze up like, he did the stiff-armed robot again, and now you get all smiley instead." Daniel turned around slowly, drying his hands on the dish towel, and looked at his son. 6 years old. All knees and questions. Missing absolutely nothing. "What else have you noticed, Detective?" Daniel said carefully. "There's 2 coffee cups in the morning now. Not 1. And one of them has flowers on it, and we don't own a cup with flowers on it." Noah put his crayon down. "And Saturday, when you thought I was asleep in the truck, I wasn't all the way asleep, and you were talking to somebody on the phone, and you laughed. You did the big laugh. You never do the big laugh." He looked up at his father with Sarah's eyes absolutely serious. "Is it Miss Mia? Are you and Miss Mia friends now?" And Daniel Brooks stood in his kitchen with a dish towel in his hands and understood that the moment he and Mia had been so carefully planning for the moment they'd agreed they would do together. When they were sure done right, that moment had just arrived on its own schedule, chosen by a 6-year-old, the way the important moments in Daniel's life always seemed to arrive without asking his permission first. He crouched down to Noah's level. It was a thing he always did. You didn't talk down at a kid his own father had talked down at him. His whole childhood loomed over him, and Daniel had decided before Noah could even walk that he would always get down to the boy's eyes. "Can you keep a secret for one day?" Daniel said. "Just one. Till tomorrow." Noah's eyes went huge. "Is it a good secret or a bad secret?" "It's the best secret," Daniel said. "But I want to tell it to you right with Miss Mia there because it's about her too. And it wouldn't be fair to tell it without her. So can you hold it till tomorrow? Can you do that for me? Is Miss Mia gonna be your girlfriend? Daniel laughed. He couldn't help it. You really don't miss anything, do you? Tyler at school says girlfriends are gross, Noah informed him. But Tyler eats glue, so. He shrugged, dismissing Tyler's entire testimony. I don't think Miss Mia's gross. I think Miss Mia's nice. She knew Gerald was a good name for a bug. He considered this a moment the weight of the evidence. Then, with the devastating directness only a 6-year-old can manage, he asked the question that stopped Daniel's heart. If Miss Mia's your girlfriend, does that mean she has to leave? Because everybody leaves. Mommy left. And Grandma, we don't talk about. Everybody always leaves. So if she's your girlfriend, does she have to leave too? Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him, because there it was. There it was coming out of his son's mouth. The exact same lie, the exact same wound, the exact same voice from the exact same well, passed down somehow. Without Daniel ever meaning to pass it, the way his father's ghost had reached across a grave. Everybody leaves. His boy already believed it. His boy was already 6 years old at the bottom of his own well, and Daniel hadn't even seen it happening. Hey, Daniel said, and his voice came out rough. Hey, look at me, Noah. Look at me. Noah looked at him. Who told you everybody leaves? Nobody told me. Noah's chin was doing something now, wobbling, the brave face cracking. It's just true. Mommy left. She didn't want to, but she left. And you always look sad when Miss Mia's door opens because you think she's gonna leave too. I can tell that's why you do the robot face, because you're scared. I'm not dumb, Dad. I know you get scared. I get scared too. And Daniel Brooks, on his knees on his kitchen floor, pulled his son into his arms and held on, and thought he learned it from me. Not from words. From the robot face. From the 200 careful words. From watching me stand behind a door for 3.5 years. He learned to be scared by watching me be scared. That's how it gets passed down. That's exactly how it got passed down to me. Listen to me, Daniel said into his son's hair, fierce, his own eyes burning. Listen, your mom did not leave because she wanted to. Your mom got sick in a way nobody could see coming, in a way that wasn't anybody's fault, and especially wasn't yours. She would have stayed forever. She would have stayed 1,000 years if she could have. She did not leave you, Noah. She was taken, and that is a completely different thing, and I need you to hear the difference. But she's still gone. She's still gone. Daniel agreed because he would not lie to his son, not ever, not even to make it hurt less. That part's true, and it's not fair, and I'm sorry. But here's the part that's also true, and I've been getting it wrong, buddy. I've been getting it wrong for a long time, and I only just figured it out. He pulled back to look at Noah's face. Not everybody leaves. Some people stay. Some people fight to stay. And the fact that we lost your mom doesn't mean we're going to lose everybody. It just means we know how much it matters when somebody stays. You understand, losing somebody doesn't mean you stop letting people in. It means you know exactly how precious they are when they show up. Noah sniffled. Is Miss Mia gonna stay? I think so, Daniel said. I really think so. But I'll tell you something. That's the secret, that's the whole secret. Miss Mia already told me she wants to stay. Not just for me, for you too. She told me that, before I even asked her to. Noah's tear-streaked face did something complicated. She said she wants to stay for me. She said, and I'm telling you exactly what she said. She said if we did this, then you'd be hers too, in every way that counts. And she'd never make you a promise she wouldn't keep. Daniel wiped his son's face with his thumb, the same way Mia had wiped his in the cafe. She's been thinking about you this whole time, bud. Not just me. You. She thinks you're worth staying for. And you know what? She's right. Noah threw his arms around his father's neck and held on, and Daniel held him back, and the two of them stayed like that on the kitchen floor for a long, long time. Two people at the bottom of the same well learning together for the first time that somebody had come to pull them out. The next morning, Daniel called Mia before the sun was up. He knows, Daniel said. He figured it out. The coffee cups, the humming, Mia, he's 6, and he's a detective, he caught everything. And then he asked me, his voice caught. He asked me if you were going to leave. Because everybody leaves. He already believes it. He's already got the voice. My father's voice. It got to him and I never even saw it happening. There was a silence on the line. Come over, Mia said. Bring him, right now. Don't wait for tonight. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There's no perfect moment. If that little boy spent last night scared, I was going to leave. Then I'm not going to let him be scared for one more minute than he has to be. Bring him over and let me tell him myself. Mia, we said we'd go slow. We said, Daniel. Her voice was gentle and it was absolutely immovable. Slow was to protect him. But slow is hurting him right now. He's scared. Plans change when a kid is scared. That's the whole job. Bring him over. And Daniel Brooks, who had spent his whole life certain that he had to figure everything out alone, hung up the phone and understood that he no longer did, that there was a second adult in his son's corner, now one who just overruled him for exactly the right reason, and that being overruled like that for the sake of his boy was possibly the best feeling he'd had in years. He woke Noah up gently. Hey, bud. Change of plans. We're going to Miss Mia's for breakfast. Noah sat up, hair straight off his head, instantly awake. The secret, Daniel confirmed. Come on, she's waiting. Mia opened her door at 5:25, the same time, the same knock in reverse, and there she was. And there behind her was the little apartment Daniel had lived beside for 3.5 years, and never once seen inside, warm and full of color. And there on the kitchen counter, Daniel saw it, and his throat closed, the orange. Still there, gone soft and wrinkled now, weeks old, and she still hadn't thrown it away. You kept it, he said. I told you I did. Mia crouched down before Daniel could say anything else, right down to Noah's level, the same way Daniel always did. And Daniel watched her do it, and felt something break open in his chest, because she just knew, without being told, that you got down to a child's eyes. Hi, Noah. Hi, Miss Mia. Your dad tells me you figured out a pretty big secret. Noah nodded solemnly. The coffee cups, and the flower one, and the humming. You're a very good detective, Mia said seriously. That's a real skill. Can I tell you the secret myself? Your dad said I could because it's about me too. Another solemn nod. Mia took a breath. And Daniel watched the bravest woman he'd ever met gather herself to do the most important thing either of them would ever do. The secret is that I love your dad, Mia said simply. I have loved your dad for a long, long time. Longer than you've been able to count. And I know your dad loves me too. So we decided we're going to be together, really together, not a secret anymore. And I know that's a big thing, and I know sometimes big things can be scary. So I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen really close because this is the most important part. She reached out and took both of Noah's small hands in hers. I know you lost your mom. And I know that when you lose somebody, it can make you scared that everybody's going to leave. But I want to promise you something. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to be your dad's girlfriend who's here for a while and then gone. I'm choosing him, and I'm choosing you, both of you, the whole package forever. You're not a thing I have to put up with to be with your dad. You're part of why I want to be here at all. Do you understand what I'm saying? Noah's lip was trembling. You're choosing me too. I'm choosing you too, Mia said. Just as much, maybe even a little more. Don't tell your dad. Noah looked at her for a long moment with Sarah's eyes, and then in the way that only a 6-year-old can, cut straight to the center of everything, he asked, But what if you get sick? Like Mommy, what if you get sick and get taken? And Daniel's heart cracked clean in half, because it was the real question, the one under all the other questions, the one Daniel himself had never been brave enough to say out loud to anybody. What if I let you in, and you get taken too? And his son had just asked it plainly at 05:25 in a warm kitchen. Because children ask the things adults spend their whole lives too afraid to say. Mia didn't flinch. That's a really good question, she said. And I'm going to tell you the truth because your dad and I decided we're always going to tell you the truth. I can't promise I'll never get sick. Nobody can promise that. Your mom couldn't have promised it, and it wasn't her fault. I can't promise I'll live forever, and neither can your dad, and neither can you. She squeezed his hands. But here's what I can promise. For every single day that I'm here, and I plan on that being a whole lot of days, I will show up. I will choose you. I will love you as hard as I possibly can. Because the answer to being scared of losing people isn't to never let them in. If we did that, we'd be all alone, and that's its own kind of sad, isn't it? The answer is to love them so much every day we've got that no amount of days would ever have been enough. That's not a scary thing, Noah. That's the best thing there is. That's the whole point of everything. Noah was quiet. Processing. 6 years old, weighing the biggest truth there was. Then he looked up at his father. Dad, is that true? Is that the real answer? Yeah. And Daniel Brooks, who had spent 32 years believing the exact opposite, who had built a fortress out of not letting anybody in, who had stood behind a door for 3.5 years, precisely because he could not bear to love something and lose it again, got down on the floor beside Mia so that both adults were at his son's eye level and said the truest thing he had ever said in his life. It's the real answer, bud. It took me a long time to figure it out. Longer than it should have. I got it wrong for a lot of years. And I almost taught it to you wrong, and I'm sorry for that. But Miss Mia's right. You don't keep people out to keep from losing them. You love them like crazy while they're here. That's the answer. That's the whole answer. And I'm just now learning it same as you, so we can learn it together. Deal. Noah looked back and forth between the two adults, kneeling on the kitchen floor in front of him. And then slowly a smile spread across his face. Sarah's smile. The one Daniel saw every morning, and it broke and healed him at the same time. Deal, Noah said. And then, because he was 6, and because the enormous emotional weight of the moment had reached its absolute limit. Can we have pancakes now? You said breakfast. And Mia Carter laughed that warm laugh, the one that had stopped Daniel working on a hot September day 3.5 years ago, and pulled the little boy into her arms, and over his head, her eyes met Daniel's, streaming shining. And Daniel mouthed 2 words at her across his son's head. Thank you. Mia shook her head. No, she mouthed back. And then, out loud into Noah's hair. Pancakes. Absolutely, we can have pancakes. I make the best pancakes on this entire street, and that's not bragging, that's just a fact, and now you two finally get to find out. They had pancakes. All 3 of them crowded around Mia's little table, and Noah talked with his mouth full about dinosaurs, and a kid named Tyler who ate glue and a new bug he'd found named Gerald II. And Mia listened to every word with the same complete attention Daniel gave the boy. And Daniel sat there between the 2 of them and thought that he had never not once in his entire life sat at a table that felt like this, like a family. He didn't have another word for it. He'd never had a reason to use the word before. Not really, not the way people meant it in the commercials and the movies, the warm, crowded table, the too much food, the kid with syrup on his chin. He'd had Noah, and Noah was everything, but even with Noah, there'd always been the ache of the empty chair, the sense of a table set for people who weren't coming. And now the chair was full. Now the table was loud. Now there was somebody laughing at his son's jokes who wasn't him. Somebody refilling the syrup. Somebody who'd learned his boy's name and his boy's fears and had chosen to stay anyway. You're doing it again, Noah announced through a mouthful of pancake. Doing what? Daniel said. The froze-up thing. But the happy version. You're just sitting there being happy and forgetting to eat. He does do that, Mia agreed. I've noticed it too. He gets a look. I do not get a look. You get a look, they said at exactly the same time, Mia and Noah both, and then looked at each other and burst out laughing. Ganging up on him already a team. Already the 2 of them and Daniel Brooks sat at the loud, full table and let himself get the look, the happy froze-up look, and did not fight it for 1 single second. Later, after Daniel had dropped Noah at daycare and reported to his unit, Marcus caught him in the passageway. Okay, Marcus said, falling into step beside him. I need details because Priya's been on me for 3 weeks, and I've got nothing. You've gone completely dark. And the last real update I got was 1 unhinged text about 4 cups of coffee. We told Noah this morning. Marcus stopped walking. You already? I thought you 2 were going slow. I thought the whole plan was, he figured it out. Kid's sharper than both of us. And then he got scared she was going to leave because... Daniel's jaw tightened. Because he's already got it. The thing I've got. Everybody leaves. He's 6, and he already believes everybody leaves, and I put that there, Marcus, without ever meaning to, just by being scared where he could see me." Marcus was quiet a moment. "Yeah. But he doesn't believe it anymore," Daniel went on. "Mia fixed it. In about 4 minutes. Got down on the floor with him and told him you don't keep people out to keep from losing them. You love them like crazy while they're here. And I watched my kid. I watched him actually take it in. The thing I couldn't fix in 6 years, she fixed over pancakes." He shook his head. "She's Marcus. I keep thinking I'm going to hit the bottom of it, the part where she turns out to be too good to be real, the catch, the exit. And it's just not there. There's no catch. She just loves us, both of us, like it's easy." "It's not easy," Marcus said quietly. "Loving somebody who spent his whole life sure he's unlovable. That's not easy, brother. That's about the hardest loving there is. She's not doing it because it's easy. She's doing it because she looked at you and decided you were worth the hard version." He clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "That's the whole thing, man. That's what I've been trying to tell you for 6 years. You were always worth the hard version. You just never had anybody willing to do it before, so you figured it didn't exist." Daniel had to look away for a second down the passageway, blinking. "When'd you get so smart?" he said roughly. "Priya. Everything smart I've ever said came from Priya." Marcus grinned. "Speaking of, she wants all of you for dinner Sunday. You, Mia, the kid. Non-negotiable. She's already planning to cook for 15, so bring your appetite. And warn Mia now that there is no such thing as leaving Priya's table hungry. She'll take it as a personal failure." "We'll be there," Daniel said. And then, because it still felt strange and enormous in his mouth, he said it again, testing the shape of it. "All 3 of us will be there." "All 3 of you," Marcus repeated, and his grin softened into something else, something that looked almost like pride. "6 years I've been waiting to say those words about you, Brooks. All 3 of you." He shook his head. "Go on. Get to work. And Daniel," he caught his friend's arm as he turned to go, "the thing you were scared of, the whole time, that if you let somebody in, you'd lose them, and it'd be worse than never having them at all." He held Daniel's eyes. "You know that's still true, right? It's still a risk. Loving them doesn't make you safe. It just makes it worth it." "I know," Daniel said. And for the first time in his life, he did know all the way down, and it didn't send him running for the exit. "I know. That's the part I finally figured out. It was never about being safe. I spent 32 years trying to be safe. Turns out safe is just another word for alone." Marcus smiled. "Look at you. Getting wise in your old age. Learned it from a 6-year-old mostly," Daniel said. "And a schoolteacher. And a menace." He allowed himself a small grin. "Mostly the menace, honestly. Don't let it go to your head." "Too late," Marcus said. "It's already there." And Daniel Brooks went to work and did his job the way he always did it, steady and certain. The man the younger sailors looked to when they wanted to know whether to be afraid. But something in him was different now, and the younger sailors couldn't have said what. Only that the chief was right, that Brooks had been running on fumes for years, and that somewhere in the last 3 weeks, somebody had finally quietly filled the tank back up. Sunday dinner at the Chen's was exactly the chaos Marcus had promised, and Daniel Brooks loved every loud minute of it. Priya took one look at Mia in the doorway and pulled her into a hug like they'd known each other 20 years, and Marcus's 2 daughters immediately adopted Noah as a project, dragging him off to show him a fort they'd built out of couch cushions, and there was too much food, mountains of it. And Priya kept putting more on everyone's plate the instant it emptied, treating any clean plate as an emergency requiring immediate correction. "Mia, eat, you're a bird, eat," Priya commanded, ladling more onto her plate. "I've had 3 helpings," Mia protested, laughing. 3 is nothing. 3 is a warm-up. Daniel, tell her." "There's no point fighting it," Daniel said. "I've been coming here 6 years. I've never once won." "He hasn't," Marcus confirmed. "Not one time. My wife is undefeated." Daniel sat at that crowded table, with a plate that would not stay empty, and watched his son laugh with 2 little girls in a cushion fort, and watched Mia get folded into his oldest friends, like she'd always been there. And he thought about the empty chair that used to sit at every table in his life. It wasn't there anymore. He kept checking for it the way you keep touching a tooth that used to ache and it kept not being there. After dinner, when the kids were occupied and Priya had commandeered Mia for a tour of the garden, Marcus and Daniel ended up on the back porch with 2 beers, the way they had 100 times over 6 years. "So," Marcus said. "So," Daniel said. "You look different, man. You know that. You've looked different for weeks now. The guys at the unit are asking me what happened to you. Somebody said you laughed at the coffee mess, out loud, in front of people." "I might have." Petty Officer First Class Brooks. Laughing. In public. Marcus shook his head in mock wonder. "The world's ending. It's a sign." Daniel took a pull of his beer and looked out at the yard where somewhere he could hear Noah's voice going a mile a minute, telling Marcus's daughters about a dinosaur that could swim and fly and breathe fire. "I keep waiting for it to go wrong," Daniel admitted. "That's the thing I can't shake. Every morning I wake up and part of me is braced for it to be the day it falls apart. The day she changes her mind, or the day something happens, or the day I do the thing I always do and screw it up and push her away. I've been happy for exactly 6 weeks and I still don't fully believe I get to keep it. That's the damage talking. I know it is. Doesn't make it quieter." Marcus was quiet a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Something Priya said, actually. Because like I told you, everything smart, I know comes from her." He set his beer down. "She said the thing about people like you, people who got hurt young, who learned real early that love gets taken away. She said the healing isn't that the fear goes away. The fear never fully goes away. She said the healing is that you learn to feel the fear and choose the person anyway. Every single day. You wake up braced for it to fall apart, and you choose her anyway. You feel the old voice telling you to run, and you knock on her door anyway. That's not being fixed. That's being brave. And Priya says brave is better than fixed, because fixed is a thing that happens to you, and brave is a thing you do." Daniel turned that over for a long time. "Your wife," he said finally, "should be running the country. I've told her. She says it's too much paperwork." They laughed and clinked their bottles, and sat in the comfortable quiet of 2 men who'd known each other long enough to not need to fill it. "I'm going to marry her," Daniel said. Marcus went still. Not yet," Daniel said quickly. "It's 6 weeks. I'm not an idiot. I know it's 6 weeks. But I'm telling you now, so that when it happens, you remember, I called it on your back porch, drinking your beer. I'm going to marry her, Marcus. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 3.5 years I stood behind a wall being sure I couldn't have her, and now I'm just sure I want her forever. Funny how fast that flips once you let it." Marcus looked at his oldest friend, the man he'd spent 6 years dragging back to life. The man who'd shown up to that first blind date, like he was being marched to his execution. The man who was now sitting on his porch talking about forever, with his eyes clear, and his shoulders down for the first time since Marcus had known him. "I'll be your best man," Marcus said. "That's not a question. That's happening. I've been your best man since before you had a wedding to have one at. I wouldn't have anybody else." "You don't have anybody else," Marcus pointed out. "I'm still your only friend." "You're still my only friend," Daniel agreed, grinning. "But you'd be first even if I had 100. The months that followed were in the plainest and most extraordinary way ordinary. That was the thing Daniel could never quite get over, how ordinary happiness turned out to be once you finally let it in. It wasn't fireworks. It was Mia's coffee cup with the flowers on it, living permanently on his counter now. It was Noah calling through the wall that no longer meant anything before running next door in his pajamas. It was the 3 of them at the little table, and then more and more at Mia's bigger table, because her apartment had more room, and then eventually at a table in a house they rented together on a quiet street 6 blocks from the base, because 2 apartments with a wall between them had started to feel absurd once the wall stopped mattering. The day they moved in, Daniel found the orange. It had followed them from apartment to apartment, that shriveled months-old orange wrapped now in tissue paper in a small box Mia kept in her nightstand. And when Daniel found it during the unpacking, he stood holding it for a long time. "You still have it," he said when Mia came in. "I'm never getting rid of it." She came and stood beside him. "I know it's ridiculous. It's a rotten orange in a box. But it's the orange you handed me on the stairs that Thursday back when I was still on the other side of the wall, still sure you'd never look at me. It's the last thing from the version of us that was scared and quiet and alone. I keep it to remember how far we came." She smiled. "And to remember that I almost let a whole life slip by because I was too afraid to knock on a door. I kept the cookie plate," Daniel said quietly. "From that Christmas. I've still got it. It's in one of these boxes. I could never throw it out either." Mia turned to look at him. "You never told me that." "There's a lot I never told anybody. Turns out I've got a whole drawer of things I kept because you touched them. The plate, the song up here." He tapped his temple. "The orange was yours. Mine's the plate. Two people keeping little pieces of each other on opposite sides of a wall, both of us too scared to say a word." He set the orange gently back in its box. "We were so stupid, Mia. 3.5 years. We weren't stupid," Mia said, the way she always said it, the way she'd say it 1,000 more times over the years whenever the old grief for the lost time crept back into his voice. "We were scared. There's a difference, and we're not scared anymore. Say it." "There's no more wall," Daniel said. "There's no more wall," Mia agreed, and kissed him in the empty living room of the first house that had ever really been his, surrounded by boxes with their son thundering up the stairs to claim his bedroom. Daniel proposed 8 months to the day after the cafe. He did it simply because Mia wasn't a fireworks person, and neither was he. He did it at 5:25 in the morning in the kitchen of the new house with the coffee going, and Noah in on the secret this time. Noah, who had in fact helped pick the ring, and who had kept the secret for 2 entire weeks, which for a 7-year-old was roughly equivalent to summiting Everest. "Mia," Daniel said, and got down on one knee on the kitchen floor, the same floor where he got down every day to look his son in the eye. 3.5 years I loved you through a wall and never said a word. And then you walked across a whole cafe and asked me why not you, and it saved my life. I mean that plainly, it saved my life, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to love you quietly. I'm going to love you as loud as I possibly can out in the open every single day, and I want to do it for the rest of my life. Marry me, please. Marry us, because it's both of us. It's always going to be both of us. Marry us and let me spend the rest of my life being the man who was brave enough to knock." And Noah, who could not contain himself 1 second longer, burst out from behind the doorway where he'd been hiding and yelled, "Say yes, Miss Mia, say yes, we practiced this part." Mia laughed until she cried, and cried until she laughed and got down on the floor with both of them. Her whole family kneeling together on a kitchen floor at 5:25 in the morning, and she said yes. She said yes to Daniel, and she said yes to Noah, and she said yes to all of it, the whole package forever. Exactly the way she'd promised a scared little boy she would in a warm kitchen months before. They were married in the spring, in a small ceremony in Marcus and Priya's backyard, because it was the only place that had ever felt to Daniel like the kind of place a family got made. Marcus stood as best man exactly as promised and cried harder than anyone and pretended it was allergies. Priya cooked for 100 and fed everyone twice. Laura Bennett came. Mia had tracked her down and invited the woman who'd read the whole thing in 4 seconds and stepped aside with such grace. And Laura hugged them both and said she'd never in 11 years of social work seen two people so obviously built for each other, and that she was honored to have been the accident that got them there. And Noah, 7 years old now, in a tiny suit, so serious about his job, carried the rings down the aisle like he was carrying something made of glass. And when the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, it was Noah who'd asked to answer Noah who'd rehearsed it a dozen times. Noah who said in his clear small voice that carried across the whole backyard, "We do. Me and my dad. We choose her." There was not a dry eye in the yard. Later at the reception, when the dancing had started, and the string lights had come on, and Priya's food had defeated everyone, Daniel found himself standing at the edge of it all, with Noah beside him, both of them watching Mia dance with Marcus's daughters, spinning them around, while they shrieked with joy. "Dad," Noah said. "Yeah, bud. Remember when I asked you if Miss Mia was gonna leave? 'Cause everybody leaves." Daniel's throat tightened. "I remember. She didn't leave," Noah said with the quiet satisfaction of a detective whose case had finally closed. "You were right. Not everybody leaves. Some people stay." He looked up at his father. "And some people you gotta go get. Like Miss Mia walked across the whole restaurant to get you. That's what she told me. She said sometimes you can't wait for the other person. You gotta be brave and go get them yourself. Daniel crouched down one more time to his son's eyes. That's the truest thing anybody's ever said, bud, Daniel told him. You remember that your whole life, okay? Some people you wait for. But some people, the ones who matter most, you go get them. You be brave and you go get them. And you never ever love them quietly. You hear me? Never quiet, never behind a wall. You love out loud. Love out loud, Noah repeated, filing it away with dinosaurs and bug names and all the other important knowledge of a 7-year-old. Love out loud, Daniel said. And then Mia was there, breathless from dancing, holding out both her hands, one for Daniel and one for Noah. What are my two favorite people doing hiding over here in the corner? She said. It's a wedding, our wedding. Come dance. Dad does the froze-up thing at parties, Noah explained. The happy version. I was keeping him company. Well, we can't have that. Mia pulled them both toward the lights and the music. No more freezing. Not the sad kind, not the happy kind no more. We're done freezing in this family. Come on, both of you, right now. And Daniel Brooks let himself be pulled into the light, his wife's hand in one of his and his son's hand in the other. And he danced badly and did not care, and looked around at the string lights and the friends who'd become family, and the woman who'd walked across a whole cafe to save his life. And he understood finally completely, all the way down to the 6-year-old at the bottom of the well, who had spent 32 years being told nobody would ever stay. The voice had been wrong. It had been wrong the whole time. His father had looked at a small boy and told him he was nothing, that nobody would want him, that nobody would stay for a boy like him. And his father had been wrong about every single word of it. Because a woman had wanted him so much, she'd waited 3.5 years, and then walked across a public room to fight for him. Because a friend had believed in him for 6 years, until he could believe in himself. Because a little boy with his mother's eyes looked at him every morning like he'd hung the moon. Because he was standing in a backyard full of string lights, married, surrounded, chosen, held a man so loved that the empty chair he'd carried his whole life had finally been filled. He was not unworthy of love. He never had been. He had simply been a scared man behind a wall waiting his whole life for permission he was never going to get from a dead man's ghost, until a brave woman knocked the wall down and gave him the only permission that ever mattered, which was the permission to receive it. Daniel Brooks was not the son his father tried to make. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a friend. He was a man who had learned late, but not too late, that you do not keep people out to keep from losing them. You love them like crazy. For every single day you're given out loud, unafraid, holding nothing back. He had spent 32 years believing he was a man who deserved to be alone. He was wrong. He was a man who was loved completely, loudly, and for the rest of his life, and at long last on a spring night under a canopy of light, with his family's hands in his, Daniel Brooks finally, fully, and forever believed it.